One of the ships you guys have asked me to cover really since I started my YouTube channel was the Chiss Clawcraft. Now, I've featured it in some versus matchups, but I've never actually covered the ship in a proper lore video, so I thought that would be fun to do today. And I understand the attraction to the Chiss Clawcraft. I mean, it's close enough to an Imperial TIE fighter to be familiar, but exotic enough to indicate some material difference in the vessel, which, to be honest, was the calling card of most Empire of the Hand ships. And that's actually a good starting point. Before we get into the Clawcraft, what was the Empire of the Hand? The Empire of the Hand originates in one of my favorite legend stories, and that is the Thrawn duology. It was a militarized area of Chiss space set up by Grand Admiral Thrawn, basically as a fortress in the unknown regions. The Empire of the Hand combined Imperial technology with Chiss culture, and honestly, the two heavily regimented, law and ordered focused societies weren't too different, aside from the Chiss disdain for first strikes. Anyway, in Spectre of the Past, our main characters discover a strange looking TIE fighter. Now, this may be the Clawcraft, it may not be. Generally, my understanding is that the lore has identified it as one, but there are some differences if you look at the actual ship descriptions. For example, it's said to have two wings flaring from the tail, and in Vision of the Future, a ship which I assume is the same type but maybe not, is said to be 3 times as large as an X-Wing. Now, the most obvious explanation for this is that the Empire of the Hand had other starship types, but at least as far as I'm aware, no other starfighters are explicitly mentioned, though that's something that the fandom typically fills in with their own designs. Either way, the first encounter with the mysterious Empire of the Hand ships shows them to be very technologically advanced. Luke specifically notes that they are heavily armed and are fast and maneuverable enough to mostly keep up with his X-Wing, even powered by Luke's Jedi senses. These ships also have hyperdrives, as they're spotted scouting throughout the galaxy. They also don't just have the appearance of the TIE fighter, they're actually made using Imperial TIE fighter technology with some alien flourish. And these general ideas are expanded on in other sources, which more concretely lay out the lore for the Clawcraft. I'll get to some of the basics in a second, but some of the interesting deeper stuff actually comes from Star Wars Fact File issue 137. That gives a good look at how the Chiss technology, which actually makes up much of the Clawcraft systems, is fundamentally different than that used in the rest of the galaxy. For example, the Chiss Mazer is physically distinct from the blaster the rest of the galaxy uses. The Chiss also typically didn't use traditional hyperspace technology. They had a series of beacons which allowed navigation within their system. I'm guessing the Clawcraft probably had a hybridized navigational system, given that it had to operate effectively both within and without Chiss space. But going back to the basics, there's actually something interesting that builds on a point I discussed earlier, and that is the nature of the Clawcraft design. Well, when I've said Clawcraft so far throughout this video, I've been referring specifically to the Nissus type Clawcraft. That's the one design with the 4 wings. It looks like a TIE fighter, at least in a vague sense. However, and I actually didn't realize this, I don't script these videos, I just kind of talk, but I went back to check the entry in the Saga Edition Starships of the Galaxy guide. Clawcraft is used sort of like Republic Starfighter might, so it's actually a variety of Chiss ship classes. So even though the one discovered by Luke and Mara on Nier 1 has a different design, it's still technically a Clawcraft. So that's interesting. Anyway, that same entry says that the Nissus Clawcraft, I'm just going to go back to calling it the Clawcraft, was intended to be a hybridization of technology rather than an ugly like some ship combinations are, and was generally an improvement to not only the TIE fighter, but also the TIE Interceptor. It had more armor, it had shields, it had a hyperdrive as mentioned. It wasn't quite as fast as the Interceptor, but was significantly more maneuverable, which is incredibly impressive. It ends by saying the Clawcraft could do anything a TIE Interceptor could, additionally acting as a long-range scout or attacking far-off targets in large numbers without the aid of a carrier ship. Early models actually did rely solely on the Hyperspace Beacon method, which is kind of interesting. One thing I do take slight issue with is the fact that it says the ship was similarly armed to a TIE Interceptor, but most models actually show 2 laser apertures on each wing. It's my guess that one of these could have been the primary laser cannon, while the other serves as an ion cannon, or perhaps the Charik, which was their maser launcher. The main weapon, however, the one on the end of the wings, was actually the exact same cannon as used by the TIE. What's interesting is that the weapon arms could individually move, allowing the ship to not only better target enemies, but also perform extremely advanced maneuvers not easily matchable by non-Clawcraft ships. Does that make sense in space? No, but that's just how Star Wars is. Like a TIE interceptor or fighter or an X-Wing, these cannons could be fire-linked to give off some pretty devastating damage. The main issue, or the main lacking here, is no munitions launcher, but for a light, fast interceptor, that's not surprising. You won't be surprised to learn that Chiss Clawcraft were not used expendably as TIE fighters were, and even within the Empire of the Hand, were mostly used to protect their most important places. They often operated in squadrons, with one Clawcraft being a beacon ship, which allowed the others to follow through hyperspace through that unique technology I mentioned earlier. Probably the most famous Chiss Clawcraft was the one used by Jag Fel. Jag Fel, who was the son of famed Imperial fighter pilot Soontir Fel, the eventual husband of Jaina Solo, and the nephew of Wedge Antilles. Yes, it's apparently a very small universe. Jag Fel served within Twin Sun Squadron. I've actually covered them in past videos, but basically during the Yuuzhan Vong War, Jaina, looking back at Grand Admiral Thrawn's use of the Force and also imagining how Jedi could have operated together, decided to make a squadron comprised totally of Jedi and whatever fighter they had, usually X-Wings or E-Wings. The one exception to that is Jag Fel, who brought with him his Clawcraft. Now, Jag Fel, obviously being not a Force user, could not contribute to the Jedi mind meld, which made Twin Suns so effective, but being related to both the Antilles and Soontir bloodlines, he could pretty much match their performance, and that was also partially due to just how great a piece of technology his Clawcraft was. But that's all I've got for this video. Let me know if there's something in Star Wars Legends or canon you'd like to see me discuss later on. It's a very slow period for Star Wars news. There is nothing, so really guys, if there's anything you want to see me cover, please let me know. Until next time though, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.